On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited you, both of you, may come and say to you, "Give this person your place," and then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He also said to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." The word of the Lord of God. Thanks be to God. The word of the Lord.
So Tuesday night was the last Tuesday of another month of the Women's Homelessness Initiative, and I know that leaders breathed a sigh of relief that we made it through another month. But there's also, I love watching people get ready and prepare for the next month of the Women's Homelessness Initiative. On the Sunday that we get to go down and set up the cots, everybody's excited about being able to participate. And I love that when the Tuesday setup crew comes, they're concerned to set the utensils on the correct napkin on the proper side of the plate. And who gets the honor of putting chocolates on all the pillows? And then I watch as the cooks bring in the food for that night, the best homemade food they can possibly make. I love the desire to make it a banquet feast. And I love that some months there are more people who want to provide the meal than there are openings. I'd love it if there were more competition for the overnight angels too. It's always having 2 or 3 people stay overnight is the most difficult, but the most urgent of all the tasks, because ultimately the purpose of the program is for people to stay overnight. But it's those meal times. Those are what really touch my heart. It's our desire to provide a feast, our desire to make 20 women feel like honored guests. And this year it will be our privilege to host the women overnight on Christmas Eve. If you want to have one of the best Christmases of your life, plan to sleep here that night, or New Year's Eve. I'd love it if there was a whole group that had to compete for the pleasure of being an overnight angel on those occasions. And you know, the same is true on the 3rd Thursday of every month when we serve a meal at the Senior Support Center to low-income and homeless senior citizens. Now, you know, the whole idea of there being such a thing as a homeless senior citizen is abhorrent. But for the 50 or 75 that are served that night, we hope that the love and compassion of Jesus Christ through each casserole, salad, roll, and ice cream bowl served is felt. The feeling of love and compassion is felt. And in October, we haven't talked about this yet, we're going to host a group of Nicaraguan boys and young men for 4 nights and provide their meals every day. A dozen young men with very healthy appetites. We will be searching for our good cooks in that group too. Good cooks and maybe somebody who will go to the store and buy them some chicken. But, you know, that's what I can do. But we'll want to make sure that they feel like our honored guests too. So in this passage, Jesus has 2 pieces of advice. You heard Terry read. 1, invite those who cannot give you anything in return. And 2, it's better to start at a lower position and be invited to a place of honor than to take a place of honor and risk the shame of being asked to step down. Despite the fact that I'm standing in front of you, I prefer relative invisibility. I don't like it, for example, when I've attended funerals where all the clergy in the room, even those without any official role to play, are called up to sit on stage. And I know, at least in Cleveland, it was a cultural thing, but early on I learned to arrive late and sit in the back. I would prefer not to be seen. And so, therefore, today's gospel is just fine with me. I mean, be a good host and don't seek out places of honor. Just Jesus as Miss Manners and Landers and Dear Abby all rolled up into one. And yet it seems quite unlikely that Jesus was simply offering wisdom about banquet protocols. So we have to ask, what else is going on, theologically? First of all, there's a couple little details I want to point out. It says he's eating at the home of a leader of the Pharisees. So, we may have a sort of a one-dimensional idea about Jesus and the Pharisees, but their relationship wasn't always adversarial. And more than any of the other Gospels, Luke provides a bit of a more nuanced position. And just a few verses earlier, some Pharisees actually tried to protect Jesus from King Herod, warning him of Herod's intentions. And some Pharisees, including Nicodemus, became his followers. So at times Jesus was criticized for eating with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes. But notice here, he is eating with those who criticized him. And eating with is a big deal in this culture. This passage avoids turning the Pharisees into perpetual enemies, which I think is important. But theologically, what else is this about? And as I what is this? What's really going on? What's underneath? What is this about? I saw the dynamics related to charity versus hospitality. Hospitality, that's harder and more complex. We're providing hospitality to women who are homeless and low-income seniors and young men from Nicaragua is intermingled with difficult issues of privilege and unequal status that often go unexamined in acts of charity. Hospitality is not about something to give away. It's about being present, to offer mutual respect or honor. Jesus isn't talking about charity here. This text is about the kind of hospitality that changes people's lives. And I believe we miss some of that intent because he spoke in the context of a status-oriented, honor, shame-based, hierarchical world. In contrast, when we read this text and live in our context of a modern democratic society, we claim that all persons are created equal. Now, reality may be different, and status and hierarchy are very much still at work. Even so, collectively, our national story is that we believe people can transcend their station in life by climbing a ladder or pulling up bootstraps. I mean, there's plenty to criticize in that. We certainly know its limitations. But the point is, in our cultural setting, it is not inconceivable that persons born poor can become billionaires. Think Oprah. But we must recognize in this text that the people in Jesus' time couldn't change their own status, no matter what. So it was hospitality that changed their status. And that changes lives. So there's another way to think about this passage. Recall Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Conservatives and liberals and moderates and everyone in between, except for a few of those very fine neo-Nazis and white supremacists, we all love that Dr. King speech, at least the part about which he speaks of being judged by character and not skin color. Of course, when we love that part of the speech, it ignores any of Dr. King's social critique his skin color still mattered. But the fact is, his whole speech, if we were to listen to the entire thing, is or can be very difficult to hear if you live with privilege. And that's true with this passage too. I mean, sure, we may like the message about not seeking places of honor, because I don't want to be the center of attention anyway. And inviting those who cannot repay you, well, that makes us feel good. But charity changes nothing. Hospitality transforms people because we have to see each other. And in the end, Jesus in this passage is neither talking about social graces nor advocating some sort of generic form of equality. When we generalize Jesus' words like that, they can mean nothing. For example, be nice to everyone, or invite everyone. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. So the Bible is often very specific, for example, by naming strangers and foreigners and aliens and immigrants. The Bible uses those specific words over and over again. It doesn't say welcome everyone. It says welcome them. In today's passage, Jesus names specifically the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And culturally, they're not words we may like or use, but think of the concept behind them. Outsiders, excluded in a status-oriented, honor-shame-based, hierarchical world. And in the middle of that, Jesus said, invite who? Eugene Peterson describes in the Message the people who never get invited out and the misfits from the other side of the tracks. You don't invite everyone, invite them. Another commentator put it in concrete back-to-school terms. The kid who waits at the bus stop alone, the girl who eats in the cafeteria alone, the boy who is always picked last. Don't invite everyone, invite them. Or put it into church terms. A person who doesn't know anyone, so they stand alone during the passing of the peace and watch friendly people be friendly to each other. I have visited so many times when I stood and watched friendly people be friendly to each other, because we get too accustomed to walking past one another on the street or in the mall. We don't look at each other, and in church everyone should look at everyone. But actually, yes and not exactly. So we're thinking in terms of keeping with the theme of changing the hierarchy. It would be not rushing to visit our friends, but first looking for someone you don't know to make sure they feel welcome first. To take others' needs into consideration before our own. And only then would we have lived the real intent of today's gospel. It's not to welcome everyone, but to welcome guests. Everyone. Jesus doesn't disregard people with generic everyones. Think about the Beatitudes. Jesus doesn't say, blessed is everyone, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to everyone. And he doesn't say, blessed is everyone, because everyone will be comforted. He doesn't say, blessed is everyone, because everyone will inherit the earth. He doesn't say, blessed is everyone, because everyone will be filled. He doesn't say, blessed is everyone, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to everyone. No, what did he say? He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. And he said, blessed are those who mourn, because they will be comforted. And he said, blessed are the meek, because they will inherit the earth. And blessed are people who hunger and thirst for justice, because they will be filled. He said, blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of justice, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. And somehow that might not seem quite fair. I mean, why not everyone? Or perhaps it doesn't quite sound fair because we fear something might be taken away from us. In our passage, Jesus said, whenever you hold a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, or your brothers, or your relatives, or your rich neighbors. And so I suppose we could think of them as the losers in this story. But Jesus isn't trying to identify losers. He's showing us the meaning of the kingdom of God. It's a banquet feast of those previously not invited. Jesus isn't saying the feast won't be ready to serve until everyone is seated around the table. He is saying the feast won't be ready until the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind are seated at the table. And the stranger, the foreigner, the alien, the immigrant, and the kid at the bus stop, and the girl alone at lunch, and the boy picked last on the playground, and the visitor watching others pass the peace of Christ, and the poor in spirit, and people who mourn, and the meek, and the people who hunger for justice, and those who are persecuted for seeking justice, and the WHI women, and homeless senior citizens, and young Nicaraguans. And somehow, when you put it that way, I feel more included than if you simply said everyone is welcome. Saying everyone's welcome means little without being challenged by Jesus to invite them. And challenges me to think about how we can practice that in our personal lives, like at work, or at school, or walking in our neighborhoods, or on the playground, in church, on this Labor Day weekend, with workers at stores or restaurants or offices and more. And you think about, how do we play this out and where else? So lastly, in that same vein, I don't want to just simply say thank you to everyone who helped with the Women's Homelessness Initiative in August. I want to specifically name and say thank you to Carol and Skip Spenceley, and Floaty Anderson, and Carla Yepes, and Pat Peters, and Judy Thompson, and Emily Magner, and Sue Wofford, and Christy Murphy, and Jean, and Marita Fransky, and Karen Coulter, and Billy and Sid Smith, and Blake Chambliss, and Sheila Kowal, and Lally Marie, and Robin Pongrace, and Patty Crew and Ray Allen, and David Conger and Harriet Milnes, Pam Hennessy, Jamie, Susanna, and Addison Willie and their friends, Deborah McNair and Sherry Wilkins, Jeanette Fideli, Joan Root, Robin Wilkerson, and especially our overnight angels, Linda Sedarius, Karen Tirsdell, Karen Collier, and our other guests. Those are the three coordinators, Mark Winkle, and Bill and Eileen McCarran, and Leah Johnson, and Beth Harris, and Pat Smith, and me. You realize that's 44 different volunteers in August alone? And in June, in addition to many of these same folks, there were 10 more. Suzanne Roberts, Martha Acosta, Siri Martin, Gemma Fideli, Julianne Jensen, and Charlie Martin, Bob and Marlene Lederer, and Kelly Young. That's 54 people involved in providing hospitality, and those are only the ones who signed up. So I could see their names on the computer screen, because I think Leo and Kathy were there, and I know there are other regulars who were busy this summer. And yet, if I start going down that road, I will definitely forget someone. Though I did go through the directory and found at least 31 more people who participated in WHI in the past year. The worst thing about having naming people specifically is the possibility of leaving just one name off. So in the end, I guess I probably should have just said, thank you, everyone. And if I didn't include you, I apologize. But there's one more thing. So people who provided or served dinner on the third Thursday of the month, every month this summer at the Senior Support Center, coordinated by Joan Root, thank you. There were 11 more people that aren't already named on the previous list. Camille Learned and Karen Klein, Mary Jo Young and Matt Appleman, Michelle Ferguson, Terry Thomas, Candace Johnson, Nancy and Carrie, Terry and Brian. That is 65 different people this summer alone. If you're here for the first time, you might be surprised we have 65 people. Come back when it's not Labor Day. But each of these 65 people demonstrating the difference that while we can offer charity to a generic everyone, true hospitality changes us. And that changes the world. It's also how we wish to change the world this fall. So starting later this month, we'll be engaging in something that's called a relational campaign. You may have heard us use those words. They're big words to simply say that 6 times during the fall, we're going to engage in conversations with one another during the second hour. One-on-one, hearing each other's stories, discovering our shared experiences, finding common ground on which to build deeper, stronger, and more transforming relationships, moving from surface-level interactions to more deeply satisfying connections. And when that happens, you and I and the world will all be changed. Amen. I invite you to look in the chair in front of you. It says,